How's it going, everyone, and welcome all in for another episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. We got a lot to get to. There's been a lot of good news from the WCC over the last couple weeks. We've had a couple of additions to the non-conference schedules for Gonzaga. Santa Clara is basically, we're at the unofficial stage of their schedule being done. Washington State released their full schedule officially. I also created my still maybe way too early, WCC power rankings posted on the Instagram account. I'm going to go in more in depth about those later on. Pacific added to their schedule, a big one actually on their schedule. So again, we'll get into some of the not out of conference, non-conference additions and full schedules that we've seen to this point. But the big news is that the WCC released its full schedule over the last couple weeks and that was back on August 6th. The schedule will feature, obviously, all 11 teams with the additions of Washington State and Oregon State. It will begin on December 28th, Saturday, December 28th, and run until Saturday, March 1st, which does mean also then the WCC tournament will begin that following week. It will be March 6th to the 11th at the Orleans Arena, featuring all 11 teams. We're still waiting on details of what the format of what the WCC tournament is going to look like. So, started to do kind of like a little bit of a deep dive and review of what this new WCC schedule is going to feature. Much like last year, we're going to see games throughout the course of the week. Not primarily, yes, still Thursday and Saturday, but we will see a slate on Monday, and then a fair number of games on Tuesdays and Wednesdays throughout the course of WCC play. So the only days in which we will not see games during the regular season will be on Fridays and Sundays. And as starting to kind of like take a peek, look at what some of the maybe who has some advantages, who has some disadvantages based on just the way the schedule is set up. Some highlights to take a peek at. Washington State and Oregon State, which we knew this was coming, only will be playing one time, and that will be in February at Oregon State. USF and Santa Clara, one of the bigger matchups all year long, one of the best fun games to watch, both down in Santa Clara and then, of course, up in San Francisco. But both those games are going to be done by early January. I believe it's January 11th. All those games will be done by then. So if you're going to want to watch those two, put it on the calendar very early on that USF Santa Clara will be wrapped up. Washington State, just taking a look at some of their key games, their WCC opener, their first WCC game will be on that opening day of December 28th at Portland. And then they'll be taking on their first time playing Gonzaga will be on January 11th in Spokane. And then on January 25th, later that month, is when they will play St. Mary's for the first time, and they'll be hosting them in Pullman. For Oregon State, their first WCC game will be on December 30th, Monday, against Portland. They'll be hosting them in Corvallis. Gonzaga, when they play Gonzaga for the first time, that will be on January 16th, and they will also be hosting them in Corvallis. And then St. Mary's will be making the trip up to Oregon to take on the Beavers on February 8th. Those are the first matchups with those big schools for Oregon State and Washington State. Oregon State will then also finish off their conference play first time through the WCC at St. Mary's on Saturday, March 1st. Which does mean that St. Mary's and Gonzaga will not be the season finale for the WCC as it has been the last couple seasons. Those two games, The first matchup will take place in Moraga on February 1st. And then the second one, a few weeks later, February 22nd, will be at Gonzaga. So those are the two St. Mary's Gonzaga matchups as we get into February. So again, they won't see each other until February, but they will not be the season finales that we have seen the last couple of years. So those two matchups will also conclude a little sooner than we've seen in recent years. St. Mary's' schedule is also kind of interesting, just looking at the way theirs is broken down. They're going to be done with Pepperdine, Pacific, San Diego, and we'll already have played Portland once by mid-January, which does mean that the rest of the way, they will be taking on the projected top 7 of the league the rest of the way, or at least what I think is going to be the projected top 7 of the league the rest of the way, and then including Portland in that mix one more time. So St. Mary's almost kind of has the easy schedule early on, and then they will really rev up toward the back half, back 2/3 of WCC play. USF's was pretty balanced. Gonzaga has another really tough stretch toward the end of WCC play as well. They have I think it's 3 of their last 4 on the road. They have Washington State on the road. They are going to have USF on the road, Santa Clara on the road. And then they also will be hosting St. Mary's amongst that stretch as well. So again, like they also have a really tough stretch at the back half of WCC play, much like they did this past year where they had to also take on Santa Clara and then hit the road for USF and St. Mary's that last week of the season. Very similar for Gonzaga this time around. LMU is another one, as kind of scanning these schedules, that is going to get tested right away once we get to league play. The first couple games are going to have they're going to be at USF on that opening night. They're going to get Gonzaga just a week later, and then they also get toward the end of WCC play. They're going to be at Santa Clara on February 20th, and then on February 27th. That last week before we wrap up league play, they'll be hosting St. Mary's. This is a big year for LMU, and I'll get into that a little bit because it feels like this is the year where it's almost kind of make or break time for the Lions and Stan Johnson, because we've seen this team for a few years now show some potential of what they could be. Obviously, a couple of years ago, they ended up being not third in the conference, but they were in the mix with everybody else. Like they beat Gonzaga, they beat BYU, they beat St. Mary's all in the same year. And that in and of itself, as we know, was the first time that had ever happened in the years of which all 3 of those teams were in the league before BYU left. And that alone is a huge feather in the cap of that squad and what they were capable of doing last year. A lot of mixing and matching, a lot of injuries, some guys not playing up to the potential of what we thought we might see a year ago. And so we've seen this very up and down pattern for LMU. So we'll get into them a little bit later. But the WCC schedule, overall, it's a conference schedule. We know that it's going to be a little bit imbalanced because 11 teams, it's 18 games, not a full 20 games, which you might have seen, which we do see on the women's side. And very similar to what we have seen when BYU was still in the league, that there was going to be kind of like that staggered way of scheduling everything where you're not going to play everybody 2 times. And you'll see 2 of the teams only once. So there is some of that. So there'll be some imbalance scheduling there, which, thinking about teams like Pacific, it actually does benefit them that they'll only have to see Gonzaga and St. Mary's once rather than twice. So again, WCC schedules kind of is what it is, but we will be starting league play on December 28th. We'll be concluding it on March 1st of next year. The WCC tournament from the 6th to the 11th, still at the Orleans. All 11 teams will be involved, and a lot of really, really fun matchups as we kind of like take a look at the schedule. So go ahead and take a look at the WCC website, go through the schedule. I'm starting to mark my calendar on which games I really want to see, which games I might want to travel to, and all that good stuff. So lots more to come on that. And what the WCC schedule did was also kind of solidify and finalize some of the schedules that we know were coming, the non-conference schedules that were coming. Washington State finalized their non-conference schedule, and now they have their full schedule was released this past week. And theirs is interesting, where I feel like it feels like a schedule that is almost kind of set up the way for a team that is going to try to be finding its way early on. It does, on paper, it definitely looks pretty soft. Not too many like really intense matchups in that early going. They'll be playing Portland State. They do play Bradley. They'll be hosting Idaho. They'll play Iowa on a neutral court, which I feel like that's one where they're going to get challenged a little bit more, but that's into their second week of the season, second full week of the season. David Riley will be making his return to Eastern Washington on November 21st, so that will be a fun matchup up in Spokane. And then once it gets to December, it really does. This schedule does get tougher. Not overly tough, but these are going to be solid opportunities for Washington State. At Nevada, you've got Boise State on a neutral. You're going to be hosting Missouri State, traveling to Seattle to take on Washington. Northern Iowa is in there on a neutral site. So a lot of solid matchups. I'm not going to say really good games on the schedule. And just seeing what we've seen from some of the other WCC schools and what they've been able to put together, this one seems it's okay. Now, I was thinking about where Washington State was a year ago, thinking about the NCAA tournament. I don't know if this schedule quite screams tournament quality non-conference. I mean, if they clean house and they take care of everybody on their schedule and maybe drop like one or two, if they go like 11-2 in this, then maybe like that actually might be good enough. If you also have a great conference slate and do well in WCC play. But just looking at this on the surface, it does seem a little on the kind of mid side of schedules. Obviously, it's not a soft schedule because Nevada is going to be good, Boise is going to be good, Washington is going to be a solid opponent, and again, a familiar opponent for Washington State. But at the same time, there's no one who kind of jumps out and kind of grabs you and says yeah, this is a really marquee game that you can point to for Washington State. So I think it plays well for the team that they're going to have coming into the year. It might be a little underwhelming as we start to think about it as a whole, but this is a schedule I think that's going to at least give them an opportunity to get on their feet, get a rhythm, and get going before they see those tougher games in December, especially with that first one, December 2nd at Nevada. The other team that kind of is unofficially has locked in their schedule is Santa Clara. Santa Clara added one more game that reported by Rocco Miller. Not Rocco Miller. I need to reconfirm the source, but McNeese State was confirmed added to the Santa Clara schedule, so that game would be at McNeese on December 3rd. This is the team that Gonzaga played in the NCAA tournament. And this was a lot of people's sleeper pick going into the tournament. Obviously, we know what Gonzaga did to them. I was not on the McNeese is going to sneak up on Gonzaga train, but a lot of people really like this McNeese team playing Santa Clara. This is going to be a fun matchup, and Santa Clara's schedule. This adding McNeese makes this a really, really good slate. Now, I'm going to say some names of what they have already on the schedule. It's going to sound kind of similar to some of the names that Washington State does have, because they too will be playing at Nevada. They too have the opportunity to play Washington. They also will be playing Bradley. They also will be playing Fresno State. All of these teams are also teams that Washington State will be playing. The additions, the separation here is also that Santa Clara will be playing St. Louis. St. Louis is going to be one of those early teams a lot of people are going to like, because what that St. Louis team has is a lot of what that Indiana State team was a year ago. They had a coaching change, and they brought over a lot of the Indiana State players over to that squad, Indiana State team that many believe, including myself, should have been in the NCAA tournament. So that St. Louis team is going to be really tough, and that's the season opener for the Broncos. Arizona State being on the schedule, Stanford being on the schedule, TCU being on the schedule. Santa Clara has put together what I think is a tournament quality level resume. Like, they're going to have the opportunity. The schedule is here for them to make a run. And we also, I'm on board with saying that Santa Clara, probably when you remove Gonzaga and St. Mary's from the conversation, has the most talent of anyone in the WCC at this moment. They have won 20 games each of the last few years. They've been on that doorstep. They had Brandon Pajemski. They had Jalen Williams. Right now they bring back Adama Ball. You bring back Carlos Stewart. I really like what Santa Clara has done with their schedule. And I've already seen some Santa Clara folks actually chiming in on Twitter, just talking about how this might be the best schedule that they've seen in a very, very long time. And obviously the best schedule they've seen under head coach Herb Sendek. And I would absolutely agree. This is the type of schedule that sets you up for March. This is the one that gets the committee paying attention, because really what they've also done is that they've minimized the number of opportunities where there can be a slip. And a slip against a team you shouldn't lose to, because now you have a lot of teams that are going to be in the conversation, or at the very least top 100 teams, because short of St. Louis and Bradley, you're looking at teams that are playing in conferences that have multiple bids every year. So this is going to be a really challenging non-conference for Santa Clara. I think it provides them a ton of opportunity, and especially when you consider the continuity that this Bronco team has. They bring back so much. They're going to be able to hit the ground running, and for a team that has NCAA tournament aspirations, has the talent, has, I think, the right coach. This is a team that can make that leap. I think the separation for them is going to be in WCC play if they can make sure that they avoid the pitfalls. Do what USF did a year ago. Grab some, which was essentially beat who you're supposed to beat, at least challenge everybody else. Don't get blown out by anybody. And then do what they couldn't do. Do what really Santa Clara did a year ago, and get some of those good non-conference games and get some W's out of there. Because if you can get those wins and then avoid any of the pitfalls, maybe you're allowed one. They are going to be set up well going into March, going into the WCC tournament, and going into Selection Sunday. I'm probably more confident now that this is Santa Clara's best opportunity, best chance to get back to the NCAA tournament, probably for the first time since Steve Nash was on campus. So they're not the only teams that obviously are still working on their schedule. Everyone's still working on their schedule and trying to make sure that they get all of those out. Gonzaga added another big one. Gonzaga added Baylor to their schedule, and that is a huge matchup. Gonzaga's schedule is just ridiculous at this point, honestly. Gonzaga added Baylor. That was reported by John Norlander from CBS. So that is a game that's going, Matt Norlander, from CBS Sports, and they're going to be playing Baylor in that first week in Las Vegas of the season. And this is a schedule that already has the battle for Atlantis, already has Kentucky, already has UConn, already has UCLA, already has San Diego State, already has Arizona State. This is maybe as loaded of a non-conference schedule as Gonzaga has maybe ever had. And that's saying something, honestly, because we know that Gonzaga's schedule has always kind of been top-notch. It's always been incredibly challenging. But even looking at the schedule from a year ago to this one, you saw at least some breaks in between some of these tougher matchups. And those breaks are fewer and far between in this non-conference schedule than it was a year ago. But again, that also makes sense because of what we saw, what we have seen, or what we know about this Gonzaga team coming back. This is a Gonzaga team that has a lot of continuity. They bring back it. They're going to at least have 3 of their 5 starters from a year ago back in the starting lineup. I'm pretty sure it's going to be 4 of the 5 back in the starting lineup. You bring in someone like Michael Ajayi, who's familiar enough with Gonzaga because he had to play against them a couple of times last year. You bring back Dusty Stromer. You bring back Braden Huff. You bring back Steel Venters. You add all the other pieces. Like this is a team that's going to be able to hit the ground running. Is going to have wildly high expectations of it. And yes, this team doesn't have the NBA talent maybe that some of the past Zags teams have had. But that doesn't mean that is a preventative in today's college basketball. And this Gonzaga team is good enough to get deeper into the tournament. We saw a year ago, yes, matchups matter and everything else, but a quote down Gonzaga team still made the Sweet 16. This Baylor getting out to the schedule in another loaded schedule just speaks to how confident that Mark Few is in this group, and that this team is going to be able to really rise to the occasion in this non-conference. I mean, I need to kind of review and really think about each of these matchups a little bit more in depth of what we're going to see. But this is going to be wild. Like this non-conference it's going to feel like almost like a precursor of like, this is probably what a Big 12 schedule is going to feel like. This is just the Zags like night in, night out are just going to be in for a fight. And Baylor looks like it's going to be that kind of jump off point, that kickoff right there at the beginning of non-conference play in that first week of the season. So another one that I just saw as I was kind of getting ready, putting together my notes and everything else, that I just want to throw out there. It's not a huge deal because I don't think this is going to come much of anything. Pacific was able to add another big game onto theirs. And they will be heading to Fayetteville to take on Arkansas, John Calipari's Arkansas team. So while John Calipari did switch schools, he will keep a WCC school on his calendar. He'll just be trading in Gonzaga for Pacific. And obviously there's not high expectations of this Pacific team. In fact, it's about as low as you possibly can have, but I think there's some hope with this squad. There's some talent on this team, and I think that's going to be a very interesting early test to see, at the very least, how much they can hang around with that Arkansas team, with that Razorback team. And if Pacific can at least not get completely blown out in that game, traveling across the country, I think it would be a really good early sign for them if they can just hang around, keep it interesting, and at least like start to show some strides. Obviously not expecting them to win, not expecting them to, like, if they can keep it almost within 20, I feel like that would be a win for that squad, especially at that point in the season. All right. So I mentioned earlier that, like everybody else, I finally did put together maybe a way too early power rankings for the WCC going into the year. And maybe I'll probably put another one together as we get a little bit closer to the season. But here's kind of like thinking about where each team is at this point, what each team has coming back, what didn't come back, and just the coaching situations at each school, I think leads me to kind of think about where we are right now with each of these teams. All right, I'll start from the bottom and I'll work my way up. And I'm going to start at number 11, and that would be Pepperdine. Right now, this Pepperdine squad, I feel like with a new coaching staff, with a lot of new players, I don't know enough about what this team is going to look like strategically and then also personnel-wise to really think that the Waves are going to really make that much noise. Especially when you consider that, I mean, the most talented guys that they had from a year ago are gone. You look at the fact that Javon Porter is gone. Houston Millette is gone. You looked at the fact that you had a lot of guys who are good players for this squad and in the WCC are no longer with them. And yes, Pepperdine wasn't good a year ago. They were right there at the bottom with Pacific. So it's not like that this team is really, they're not that much different from where they were a year ago. And even just that little bit of, yes, they were toward the bottom, near the bottom a year ago. I just look, the way I look at that squad is, especially with now what they're missing, is that I feel like that they're going to take a step back before they're able to take a step forward. There's going to be new energy in that building. I do wish the best for Pepperdine to kind of like be able to kind of get out of that hole and climb out of it. But right now, I would put Pepperdine at 11. At 10, I have Portland. Portland, it feels like since year one of Shante Leggins, there's been regression every year. Some of it has been talent related. And I think that's definitely part of what we saw this year is it's a little bit more talent related. But we also there hasn't just been that growth that we thought we would see after that first year with the success that they were able to have. They've kind of slipped a little further back. And I just don't see the influx of talent that has gone back to Portland to really make up the difference from, especially consider what some of the other teams have been able to do in this offseason, and then also thinking about what some of the just strategically and some of the coaching changes that have also happened in the WCC. Like I feel like recent results and just recent trends make me put Portland right here. So until I see otherwise, like I feel like I'm going to keep Portland right here at 10. At 9, I have Pacific, and I'm pretty high on what Pacific could be going into the year. I really liked what Coach Dave Smart was able to do in the offseason. I like the hiring of Dave Smart for this squad. This looks like it's going to be a little bit of a grittier team. This is going to be a team that is going to have to kind of win on the margins if they're going to pick up those wins. It's a Pacific team that, I mean, can go no other direction than up, considering where they were a year ago. They were one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in college basketball a year ago. The entire roster has basically been flipped over. So you're going to be looking at a new team. So I based on the pieces that they were able to get in the transfer portal, based on the coaching change, I do like the direction that they are headed. And while obviously like where I have them at 9 is not a huge lead, it is definitely a better spot than where they were a year ago, even just obviously just a few months ago. Okay, next one I have is San Diego. San Diego is an interesting one to me because last year I had them pretty low. I think I might have had them last going into the season because I just didn't know about what they were going to have on their roster. I knew they had some talent. I knew they had some guys who like, oh yeah, you can look to them and say that these are some talented guys who might be able to develop throughout the course of the season. And they started picking up some early wins, and I still wasn't totally bought in because of who they were playing. And then they stole that game against Arizona State. And that, I think, was the wake-up call that this San Diego State team is, you have to watch out for them. You cannot sleep on the Toreros. And I think that was last year was, I think, a testament to the coaching job that Steve Lavin was able to do, the testament to the talent he was able to go out and find, really almost kind of in the last minute, because it really felt like they were kind of still behind the 8 ball trying to fill out that roster, which to an extent is kind of what it feels like it's happening again this year, is that playing a little bit of catch up. So I do have a fair amount of confidence that Steve Lavin's going to be able to kind of get this team going. They're going to develop quickly. And we saw the moments last year that really kind of showed what San Diego was capable of. Now, they also lost a lot in the offseason. They lost the key pieces. What I was really disappointed to see Kevin Patton Jr. go. I was obviously seeing Deuce Turner head over to Santa Barbara was also a little bit of a hit. So there were some guys that left San Diego that if they had held on to them, were able to hold on to them, and it was like, okay, now this is a team that's going to kind of like move up. They've got action. So right now, I think I have no choice but to kind of keep them at 8 based on where they are. But this is also, I think, like it's a tentative 8, because Steve Lavin has shown that he can develop these guys quickly and be able to turn that team around. And last year is a great example of what that team was capable of doing. Right now, all right, at 7 right now, it's going to be Oregon State. One of the 2 new members of the WCC. This was a team that finished toward the bottom of the Pac-12 a year ago. They do bring back some of the pieces from last year, but this is another team that got hit hard by the transfer portal. They brought in a lot of really interesting pieces to really kind of start to fill that out. But I think between the talent, I think is okay. Like I'm not going to just say that the talent isn't there to maybe move up the rankings if they start to play well early and then carry that in the WCC play. But at the moment, like they don't have the continuity that I think you would like to have in place. I don't think they have quite the talent of the teams ahead of them in these rankings to really kind of keep that consistent run throughout the course of WCC play. Again, way too early rankings, but right now I think that's where I kind of have to set Oregon State is at that 7 spot. At 6, I have Washington State. And yes, this was a team that made the NCAA tournament a year ago, but almost no one from that tournament team returned. They have a new head coach, David Riley. They had to hit the transfer portal hard. Now, one of the things I do like is that they were able to bring over at least a few of his Eastern Washington guys, so that at least they can have some level of continuity, at least with the coaching staff. We saw how that worked at Portland a few years ago. It worked well. And so there's at least past history that shows that Eastern Washington guys can come in, hit the ground running in the WCC, and have some success. I also liked some of the other talent that they were able to bring in, bringing in the transfer guard from Calmes from Washington, I think is a huge add for Washington State. So this team is going to be good. They're going to be interesting, and I feel like they're going to be in that mix right there in the middle of the WCC race. But going in, thinking about what the talent-wise that they have at the moment, I slot them in at 6. Right behind, very close. I feel like they were kind of like right there neck and neck with who I have at 5, and that is LMU. The Lions have a lot to prove this year, and we're at the point of at least in the Stan Johnson tenure, we've seen what they're capable of doing when everyone's healthy, they're playing well, and everything else. That was a fun LMU team to watch a couple of years ago, and that's a squad that I feel like they need to they need to make the jump this year. They need to show some level of consistency. They need to show that they can start to challenge everybody else on a consistent basis. Challenge USF, challenge Santa Clara, challenge St. Mary's, Gonzaga. Yes, a couple years ago, they were able to beat Gonzaga and St. Mary's. And sure, Santa Clara was able to beat Gonzaga, still struggles with St. Mary's. USF hasn't been able to beat either of them. So LMU over the last 2 years has done something that neither Santa Clara nor USF has been able to do. But they've also struggled with everybody else. They've dropped games to teams that they shouldn't lose to. They've dropped games to Santa Clara, dropped games to USF, dropped games to kind of like, you look up and down the WCC roster. Like LMU's inconsistency has been kind of like their Achilles heel. And that's why, like, talent-wise, I really liked what they did in the offseason. I liked them getting Javon Porter. I liked them going out and getting Jan Vide. I liked them going up and getting the San Jose State transfer, who's really going to be able to add a lot to what they're able to do. They were able to put together, I think, a good team, like going into the year, adding to the pieces that they already did have, who they were able to bring back. Now we need to see it. And until I see what they're capable of doing on a consistent basis, I cannot put them ahead of the top 4 in this league. So right now, like, I have to kind of leave LMU at that 5 spot, which leads me to my top 4. Kind of know who the 4 are. And I feel like 3 and 4 are interchangeable at this point. But if I'm going on power rankings, who I think has the better upside, that's my separation here, is the better upside. So right now at 4, I'm putting USF. I'm putting them at USF at 4 because this is a team that has a very high floor. I know exactly who they are. I know exactly what they're going to do. What I don't know is if they can get over the hump and beat some of those better teams that they played, that they're going to be able to play this year. Obviously, we saw what happened last year. Just looking at the numbers, a year ago, they were 22-2 against teams KenPom 101 and lower. They were great and took care of business against the teams they were supposed to beat. Their challenge was the fact that they couldn't beat anybody else. They were 1-9 against the KenPom top 100 from a year ago. And even if you flip maybe 2 or 3 of those losses into wins, you're looking at a team that's knocking on the door of an NCAA tournament bid. You're not looking at a team that is on the road for an NIT game in their first round. You're looking at a team that is legitimately in the NCAA tournament by switching over 2 of those games, 3 of those games. And USF was that close in at least 2 or 3 of those games. So it's not like that they're that far away. What I wonder is going into this year, I like what they have at the guard in the backcourt. I really like Malik Thomas. I like what they have with Marcus Williams. I like Ryan Beasley. I really like that group together. My concern going into the year, my question going into the year, is how much of an impact is the departure of Jonathan Mobo going to have? Honestly, that wasn't something I thought that they were going to lose. I did not think that Mobo was going to end up jumping to the NBA this year. I didn't think he was going to be the 31st pick in the draft, which, I mean, he put in the work. He looked great, and he looked great in the workout. So congrats to him. But for this USF team, to me, thinking about them, it leaves a big question mark. Now, we didn't think Jonathan Mobo was going to be who he turned into going into the year. So maybe there is somebody on this roster who is going to have that breakout year for USF. Maybe it is Carl Lingard, who transferred over from USTA. There could be someone else on this roster who's that next guy up for the Dons who's going to step into that role. But I don't know. I don't know. What I do know is that this team is about as consistent in who they have been over the last 8 years as anybody on the West Coast. And USF right now, that's why I'm going to stick them at 4, because they are just, I know who they are. They're going to be consistent. I'm waiting to see the upside of who they are. And speaking of the upside, that's why for me, Santa Clara sits at 3. I mentioned it earlier. What Santa Clara was able to bring back continuity-wise, what they were able to bring in Carlos Stewart, the fact that they have a schedule that is going to give them plenty of opportunities to get tournament quality wins, resume builders. What this team's challenge is going to be is after they get some of those wins, because we saw them beat some of those teams a year ago in the non-conference. We saw them beat Washington State. We saw them beat Oregon. They're capable of getting those wins. Can they avoid the pitfalls? Can they avoid the slip when someone might be banged up, when someone misses a game? And if they can overcome that, this is a team that is going to be in the hunt in March, going to be in that conversation for an NCAA tournament bid. Hell, all it takes is one bad game in Vegas. We could be looking at maybe one of the opportunities that someone other than Gonzaga or St. Mary's could actually win the WCC tournament. Which leads me to 2. And I feel like 1 and 2, obviously we know the 2 teams, but I feel like the order at this stage is also obvious. At number 2, it's St. Mary's. St. Mary's has been the regular season champion. They shared it 2 years ago. They were the sole WCC champion last year, regular season and tournament. You lose Aiden Mahaney. You lose Josh Jefferson. You lose some other role players as well. You lose Alex Dukas. And they had to go out and reshuffle the deck. But this is still a team that brings back the reigning WCC Player of the Year in Augustus Marciulionis. This is a team that still brings back the reigning WCC Defensive Player of the Year in Mitchell Saxon. You still have Jordan Ford, who I think is going to Jordan Ross, who I think is going to have a great breakout year. You bring in Paulius Marouskas, who I think is going to also be another one of those breakout candidates. Just watching him play for Lithuania over the summer, like he looks great. So that's a guy I think you're going to have a lot of eyes on. The addition of Ashton Hardaway, the son of Penny Hardaway, who's coming in. I think he's going to add that missing piece, not that missing piece, but like that missing action that you would have had with Alex Dukas. He's going to be a good 3-point shooter, so you kind of look there. This is still a team that's going to be deep. This is still going to be a team with size. They're going to do the little things right. We just know that because it's a Randy Bennett coach team and they don't make those sorts of mistakes. And again, right now, this is a team that knows how to get it done in the regular season. They are going to also be challenged in the non-conference with a number of really good games themselves. But this is also a team that's going to need to find itself a little bit as well, because you do still have, you're replacing essentially your 2, your 3, your 4, and you just need time to kind of like rebuild that connection, that flow and everything else through the offense and everything else. So roles are going to be, I think, it's going to be really interesting to see how the roles kind of flip-flop and change as we go along in the non-conference. But the St. Mary's team is still really good. This team still has a ton of talent. They still are the number 2 team in this league as of right now to me. Which leaves number 1 and being Gonzaga, which is no surprise. This is a team that by most accounts are going to be a top 10 team, by many a top 5 team. This is a team that's going to challenge for an NCAA. This is a team who could be the team that wins a championship. This could be the team that finally does it. And it's not a team that I don't think jumps out on star power, but you have one of the best point guards in the nation, Ryan Nembhard. You have one of the best 4s in college basketball, in Graham Ike. You bring in Michael Ajayi, who led the WCC in scoring and rebounding a year ago. You have Nolan Hickman, who knows the system and knows how to play here. You bring back Ben Gregg, who is going to just do all the dirty work for what this team is going to need. This team is deeper than maybe any of the others of the last few years. While they don't have the NBA talent that we've seen and gotten used to over the past, or at least some of the teams have had, especially those title year teams have had. This Gonzaga team, I feel like while they have very, very good players, maybe some of the better players in college basketball at their positions, this is going to be a sum of their parts team. I think that this is going to be that non-conference schedule they have is going to test them night in and night out. I think the WCC schedule is going to be also test them night in and night out. I don't think there's going to be as many nights off as there maybe have been. And this is a team that just knows how to win in March. So until proven otherwise, this Gonzaga team is going to sit at 1 going into the season in my power rankings. All right, so quick review. So I did have Gonzaga. So I'll go back 11 up to 1. So I did have at number 11, I had Pepperdine, number 10, Portland, 9 Pacific, 8 San Diego, 7 Oregon State, 6 Washington State, 5 LMU, 4 USF, 3 Santa Clara, 2 St. Mary's, and at 1 Gonzaga. All right, we've got about still, let's see, 1, 2, 3 months until we get actual games. It's probably going to be about a couple months before we start to get some more action, start to hear about some of those secret scrimmages. So we have a while still to go. But schedules came out, more of the full schedules are coming out. So it is getting starting to get exciting. I spent probably way too much time looking at those schedules, even though there's not trying to overanalyze what doesn't need to be overanalyzed, but it's starting to get fun because these things are starting to roll out and we are getting closer and closer to the start of basketball season. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Be sure to follow on social media at Post by Zach and then at Unofficial WCC Pod. Subscribe on the YouTube channel as well as your favorite streaming services. And that'll do it. So thanks for listening, everybody, and I will catch you later.